My name is Grace Fairchild. I'm 38, a decorated general, retired but still called upon in emergencies. And today I walked into a wedding where my name wasn't even on the seating chart. Melissa, my little sister, was getting married. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since the day she told me wearing a uniform doesn't make you important. You're still just Grace. I showed up anyway, in full dress blues, my medals neatly pinned, my posture straight chin high. But no one greeted me. Not my mother, who avoided eye contact like I was contagious. Not my aunt, who used to braid my hair. I stood near the back, a phantom in a room of roses and satin. When the guests were seated, Melissa walked down the aisle like a princess. And I swear she glanced at me, just once. That same flicker of smugness I'd seen since we were kids. Then the reception, speeches, champagne, laughter. Until Melissa grabbed the mic. She smiled sweetly like sugar hiding vinegar. I just want to thank everyone here tonight, she said. Especially those who matter. A pause. Her eyes swept the crowd and landed squarely on me. And to those who weren't invited, thank you for reminding us that real heroes don't need to dress up in costume to feel important. Laughter, louder than music. She turned again. She's just an uninvited guest, Melissa said, pointing. A gate guard in dress blues. The ballroom echoed with cruel amusement. Forks clinked. A few guests whispered and stared. My uncle tried to stop her. Too late. I didn't flinch. I didn't stand up. I didn't reply. I looked down at my glass of water, the condensation trailing along my fingers. I had seen worse. I had stood in enemy lines, ordered strikes, and carried out missions no one ever knew about. I had carried bodies out of burning compounds. But this silence, this public humiliation, it cut deeper than bullets. Because it wasn't a stranger hurting me, it was family, and yet I sat still. Because war had taught me one thing. Retaliation too soon is just noise. Silence is strategy. I placed my glass down carefully, my left hand resting beside it where the faint inked curve of a tattoo peeked out beneath my sleeve. A small symbol, faded, barely visible, but still there. I was just about to leave, when the doors opened again. The heavy oak doors creaked, slicing the laughter midair. Heads turned, the music faded. A group of men entered, broad-shouldered, upright, and unmistakably military. Their posture spoke of discipline. Their eyes scanned like they were trained for threat assessment, even here in a wedding hall. And at the center of them stood a man I recognized instantly. Commander Robert Hutcherson, retired Navy SEAL. A legend. The father of the groom. He walked with a calm presence, the kind that makes rooms shift without him saying a word. Melissa, startled, ran to greet him. Commander Hutcherson. I'm so honored. He didn't respond. His eyes had locked onto me. Not my face, not my uniform. His gaze was fixed intently, unnervingly on my hand. More precisely, the faint tattoo visible on my left wrist. His lips parted. His steps faltered. He moved toward me slowly, as if seeing a ghost. The whole room hushed. Even the bartender froze, mid-pour. He stood before me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition. Wait, he breathed. That mark. He looked again, closer this time, as if confirming what couldn't be true. That's the blood path. The one from the western ridge. A beat passed. The room had stopped breathing. He looked up. Into my eyes. His voice cracked as he asked, General Grace, You saved half of us that night." He didn't wait for a reply. Instead, in front of the entire hall, Robert Hutcherson brought his right hand to his brow and saluted. Straight, firm, respectful. And then something even more unbelievable happened. One by one, the other SEAL veterans behind him followed suit. No hesitation, no whisper, no question. A dozen war-hardened men dressed for a wedding but moving like they were on sacred ground saluted me. Not because of my rank, but because of that night in Kandahar. Because of a mission we were never supposed to survive. Because I had gone back into the fire when the order was to retreat. And I got them out. I heard the gasps, the shifting chairs, the trembling fork in Melissa's hand as it slipped and clanged to the floor. My mother pale as porcelain. And Melissa, my sister in white, sank slowly into her seat. No more laughter, no more mockery. Just the thunderous silence of truth crashing through denial. I stood up not to make a scene, but because I was done shrinking. I nodded back to the men, hand over heart. And finally I spoke, quiet, steady. I never needed an invitation. The room remained silent, but in their eyes, I saw it. Respect, recognition, and in some regret. My father died on a Monday morning. It was early spring, and the rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. I arrived at the cemetery 15 minutes before the ceremony started, but even then my name wasn't listed among the immediate family. The funeral director didn't recognize me. Friends of the family to the left, he said, motioning away from the front rows. I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. He wasn't wrong. I found a seat 3 rows back, still close enough to see my sister holding tightly onto my mother's arm like a porcelain doll. My mother wore all black, her eyes dry, her chin lifted. Not once did she look in my direction. My sister Melissa saw me. Her face didn't change, not even a twitch. She just turned her head. No one spoke to me. No one leaned in with condolences. The pews were packed with people who'd known me as a child, who'd watched me leave for the academy, cheered when I earned my first stripe, and now they looked through me. During the eulogy, the chaplain said, "Robert Fairchild is survived by his loving wife, Clara, and his daughter, Melissa." That was the first time I truly felt like I didn't exist. After the service, I waited near the exit. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to pay respect. My mother walked by slowly, her gloved hands tight around her purse. She paused in front of me. Not a hug, not a nod. She whispered, "You didn't need to wear the uniform. This was a family event, not a military parade." And then she walked away. The silence that followed lasted nearly 5 years. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards, no text to say she'd moved houses. I found out from a neighbor. During those years, I focused on work. I led 3 international missions, coordinated disaster relief operations, and taught at the War College. I should have been up for brigadier. I had the record, the recommendations. But then came the email. It was short, cold. From the board. "Your promotion status is under internal review. A formal complaint has been filed. Effective immediately, your candidacy is suspended pending investigation." I stared at the screen for a full minute. What complaint? No details were attached. No names. Just anonymous source claims repeated misconduct and manipulation of military records. It didn't make sense. I'd never altered a single document. Every medal, every deployment earned in fire, blood, and sacrifice. I reached out to my superior. No answers. HR stayed silent. My legal rep said, "Someone's trying to bury you without fingerprints." The review took 11 months. During that time, I was sidelined. No field access, no teaching clearance, no pay increase. When it was over, they quietly reinstated me. No apology, just a letter. The claims could not be substantiated. "You may reapply for promotion in the next cycle." But the next cycle came and I wasn't even considered. My name was no longer on the short lists. I was now marked unofficially. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And in that long year when everything slowed, when I woke up each morning to silence and suspicion, I started thinking about the funeral again. About the moment my mother told me I didn't belong. I remembered how Melissa didn't even look surprised when I wasn't named in the eulogy. I remembered how at family reunions years before, she'd always joked Grace likes to play soldier, but she's really just hiding from us. And then I remembered something small, something I hadn't thought about in years, a conversation in the hallway of our old house. I'd just returned from a mission. I overheard Melissa on the phone laughing. She thinks they actually respect her. All those men. Please. She's just convenient. One day someone's going to show the truth about her little shiny badges. Back then I brushed it off. I was tired, jet-lagged. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But now, with a ghost complaint that nearly destroyed my career, with a mother who erased my existence, with a family that had closed ranks without me, I had to ask myself a painful question. What if they had helped write that complaint? What if my own family had quietly, deliberately erased me? And worse, what if they believed I deserved it? The Western Ridge was the kind of place where maps lied. Every line was out of date, every turn unfamiliar. Nothing matched the satellite feed. It was the kind of terrain that swallowed men whole and left no bones behind. I was stationed on Overwatch that week, running silent comms for Task Force Indigo, a Black Ops SEAL team executing a hostage recovery just south of the ridge. I wasn't part of their team, just support. That was always the deal with me. Invisible backbone, never on the photo. Things went wrong on the fourth day. Their radio feed went dead around 0200. One moment a whisper of movement, the next static. Then a single call came through. It was Robert Hutcherson, the SEAL team commander. Contact, North Slope, ambush, 3 down. Requesting air, anyone. Please, that was all. I checked the tactical grid. No air units within range. The backup unit was 12 clicks out and stuck in low fog. No way they'd make it in time. My orders were to wait, but I didn't. I'd studied that area for weeks, knew the ravines, the ancient rock scars, the trickling red streams that cut into the earth like veins. I knew where the light would hit and where it wouldn't. More importantly, I knew how to move without being seen. I made the call. I took a small recon team, just 3 of us, and we dropped in 2 kilometers south of the last signal. We carried only light gear, no GPS, no beacons. If things went bad, no one would come for us. The firefight was still echoing when we arrived. Flashes in the mist, the kind of violence you feel in your teeth. We crawled in under the brush and spotted 4 SEALs pinned behind a collapsed ridge. One was unconscious, bleeding heavily from the thigh. Another had broken fingers. Robert was hunched low on ammo, trying to keep morale alive with half sentences and blind fire. I motioned my team to flank left, but just as we moved, a sniper's shot clipped the branch inches from my face. I hit the ground hard. Everything turned quiet inside my head. That ringing, steady and cold. I pulled myself behind a root and realized what needed to happen. The team couldn't move, they didn't know the terrain. If they stayed put, they'd be dead within minutes. I took out my knife. There was no paper, no map, nothing to mark. So I slid a line across my palm and let the blood pour onto a flat rock. With my free hand, I used the edge of the blade to draw a crude diagram in the mud arrows, elevation notches, and narrow exit path between 2 sharp outcrops. The terrain was steep but climbable. If they followed it, they'd reach a hidden drop zone where a medevac drone could land. I handed the rock to Robert. He blinked. "This is blood, I know," I said. "Just follow it." We threw a smoke canister to the east to draw attention, then guided the SEALs west. It worked. They followed the plan. I stayed behind with one of my men covering their retreat with suppressed fire until we were the last 2 to fall back. We got out alive, barely. Sean Hutcherson, the injured soldier, flatlined twice in the evac chopper, but stabilized before dawn. Robert never left his side. Neither spoke a word about the mission afterward. That was protocol. The kind of op we ran didn't exist on record. I didn't give my name. I didn't wear tags. I wore one thing, only a small black tattoo on the side of my hand. Just above the thumb, a symbol passed down through 3 generations of quiet fighters. It meant no honor, needed only purpose. When I left the evac site, I slipped back into the gray. I wasn't there for recognition. I wasn't there for medals. The mission was done. That was enough. Until the wedding. Until the day Robert Hutcherson saw that tattoo again. And remembered. The envelope came on a Wednesday morning. No return address. Just a soft cream rectangle with silver trim and embossed lettering too elegant for anything but a wedding. It sat on my counter for nearly an hour before I opened it, as if it might burn my fingers with whatever truth lay inside. When I finally slid my thumb beneath the seal, I didn't find my name. No Grace, no Colonel Fairchild, no daughter or sister. Just a single line printed where my name should have been. "You still have a chance." I read it again. "You still have a chance." It wasn't an invitation, it was a provocation. The ceremony would be held at St. Alder's Chapel in upstate New York. The bride, my younger sister, Melissa Fairchild. The groom, Sean Hutcherson. I stood frozen for a long moment, hand-gripping the card. The same Sean Hutcherson I'd dragged through broken shale and blood that night on the western ridge. The same man whose pulse I kept alive under enemy fire while whispering numbers to calm his breathing. The one who never once sent a note, not even a thank you. I closed my eyes and heard the low buzz of his voice through the comms, strained and terrified. He was 24 then, too young for the weight he carried and too proud to admit it. I remembered the shock in his eyes when I pulled him from that hollow in the rocks. He looked at me like I wasn't real. Maybe I wasn't to him. Maybe I still wasn't. And now he was marrying my sister. I checked the date 2 weeks out. Part of me wanted to toss the invitation in the trash. Another part wanted to burn it. But I didn't do either. Instead, I placed it carefully back in the envelope, sealed it again, and set it on my desk. That night, I walked through the park across from my apartment, letting the air steady my thoughts. The trees were shedding the last of their spring blossoms. They reminded me of home before everything broke. I thought about my mother, her silence at my father's funeral, the way she turned her face when I entered the room. I thought about Melissa always smiling too brightly, always needing the center. And now she'd married herself into the very family who never acknowledged what I did to keep their son alive. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a rewriting of the past, a final draft where I had no place, no name, no voice. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed home, let them celebrate without me. I'd done it before, birthdays, holidays, promotions. I had grown used to the space my absence filled. But this time felt different. Not because I wanted their approval, God knows that ship had sailed, but because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted to see how far they'd gone to forget me. I wanted to measure the distance between who I was and who they pretended I had never been. So I booked a ticket. Not first class, not with military honors, just Grace Fairchild in economy seat 22C, next to a coughing teenager and a man reading stock reports. No uniform, no insignia. Just a press suit and the quiet resolve of someone who'd been erased too many times to keep pretending it didn't matter. I arrived in town 2 nights before the wedding, checked into a modest inn on the edge of the village. I didn't tell anyone I was there. Didn't RSVP, didn't ask for directions. The chapel wasn't hard to find. I sat in bed that night with the lights off, listening to the low hum of passing cars. And I made a promise to myself I wouldn't cause a scene. I wouldn't demand recognition. I would walk in, sit down, and observe like a ghost at her own family's table. But I also promised this, they would see me. Even if just for a moment. Even if it cracked their carefully painted picture. Because sometimes silence screams louder than rage, and mine had been echoing for far too long. I arrived at my childhood home the day before the wedding. The garden looked exactly as I remembered, hedges trimmed with surgical precision, hydrangeas blooming in whites and pale pinks. Not a single petal out of place. It was the kind of house that appeared in magazines, elegant, controlled, sterile. My mother opened the door wearing a soft blue dress and pearl earrings. Her makeup was flawless, not a wrinkle disturbed by time or grief. She didn't hug me. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "You're early. The guest room is made up. No welcome home, no I missed you. Just efficient hospitality." I stepped inside. The air still carried the faint scent of lavender and lemon polish. Every surface gleamed. Every picture frame was perfectly straight. I saw the family portraits lining the hallway, Melissa at her law school graduation. Melissa in Paris, Melissa with her fiancé. I was in none of them. At dinner, she spoke in that careful voice she reserved for country club luncheons and political fundraisers. Calm, elegant, insincere. "I hope you'll be discreet tomorrow," she said, slicing into her salmon. "Let's not make things uncomfortable for everyone." I looked up. Define discreet. Her eyes didn't lift from her plate. "Don't wear the uniform, it makes people nervous." I set my fork down. "People?" She finally met my gaze. "You know what I mean? This is Melissa's day. Don't make it about you." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The next morning, I found Melissa in the living room, surrounded by bridesmaids and flashbulbs. She wore a silk robe and an expensive smile. Her makeup team was adjusting her lashes when she spotted me. "There you are," she said brightly, as if we were the best of friends. "Come stand here, no left of me. We're doing the 3 women of the Fairchild house photo." A photographer with a neck tattoo and a lanyard snapped rapid-fire shots, while Melissa adjusted my sleeve like I was a mannequin. "This is perfect," she chirped. "It shows we're still a family despite everything." I didn't ask what everything meant. I just smiled and let her pose me like a prop. That afternoon, we rehearsed the seating arrangements. I scanned the chart posted outside the chapel door. Names printed in looping script. I searched for mine and found it 3 rows from the bottom, Grace Fairchild, misspelled, and not even corrected with a pen. My assigned table was near the restrooms, beside a speaker that hissed with feedback every time the music shifted. My place card was crooked. No one else seemed to notice. I sat in silence, watching guests pass with flutes of champagne and congratulations. Some nodded politely. Most didn't see me at all. I was a shadow with a crooked name tag. At one point, Melissa floated by in her rehearsal dress, a glass of Prosecco in hand. She leaned down and whispered, "Don't look so stiff. This is all for the photos." Then she kissed the air beside my cheek and glided off. Later that evening, as the lights dimmed for the pre-wedding dinner, a large screen lit up behind the main table. A video began playing sweet piano music, baby pictures, family vacations. The narration was warm, generic. To the family that raised us, to the ones who shaped who we are. Images of our childhood flickered on screen, mostly Melissa sometimes, both of us, and then a pause. A photograph of me in uniform, standing beside a helicopter in Afghanistan, dirt on my boots and steel in my jaw. That photo had gone viral once, after a news outlet ran a story about a rescue op gone right. But here it was just another image in a slideshow. No context, no name, no explanation. The room clapped politely. Melissa dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. My mother smiled softly. But no one turned to look at me. Not even once. Not to ask what that picture meant. Not to ask what I'd done. Not to thank me for it. To them it was a decoration, something to add gravitas to the pageantry. A borrowed valor they could display without ever having to acknowledge the cost. The slideshow ended with a photo of Melissa and Sean, laughing in a meadow, arms outstretched like models in a perfume ad. The applause rose louder. I clapped too. Slowly, precisely. Like a guest who had just seen a performance. Because that's what it was. A performance. This wasn't a wedding. It was a showroom of curated smiles, rehearsed lines, and perfect lighting. A place where everything had a place. Except for the truth. I sat back in my chair, letting the noise wash over me, and realized something: they hadn't just excluded me. They had replaced me. And the world they built, this polished, airbrushed illusion, they would do anything to protect it from the memory of who I really was. But tomorrow they wouldn't have a choice. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up before dawn. Not out of excitement or nerves, but because something inside me refused to settle. Something didn't sit right. I had learned to trust that instinct. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the early light fall across the faded photograph on the nightstand, Dad holding my hand on the day I graduated from West Point. His smile was quiet but proud. He hadn't said much that day. He didn't need to. It was in his eyes. That memory carried me through the worst nights overseas. It grounded me when my own country turned its back. And it whispered to me now, look closer. So I did. I pulled out my tablet, logged into the encrypted military portal, and accessed my internal review file, something I hadn't dared look at in over a year. The screen loaded slowly. I scrolled past the summaries, past the formalities, until I reached the reason I had been denied promotion. Concerns regarding fabricated mission accounts. That line still felt like a gunshot. I tapped open the redacted report. Attached to it was the original source of the claim, an anonymous email sent directly to the Department of Defense's internal ethics channel. It was titled Fraudulent Conduct. GF, and its contents made my blood freeze. She never led that mission, it began. She was air support at most. She inserted herself into the story. There were no witnesses, no commendations filed. It's all smoke and mirrors for career advancement. The email was calculated, surgical. It didn't sound angry, it sounded professional. Like it was written by someone who knew exactly how to stay just inside the line of plausible concern while lighting a fire they knew would burn quietly and effectively. I read it twice, 3 times, and then I opened the file's metadata. The email had been scrubbed, rerouted through 3 anonymous relays. Standard obfuscation. But I had tools. One of them was a linguistic forensics module designed for intelligence cases, authorship attribution through natural language processing. I uploaded the message. Then for comparison, I uploaded 5 documents I had stored on this very device. Emails from Melissa over the years, her scholarship essays, her law firm blog post drafts, her long-winded holiday newsletters. The analysis took 3 minutes. When it finished, the result blinked back at me: linguistic match, 96.4% confidence. Subject Melissa Fairchild. My stomach turned. I read the number again. Not 80, not even 90, 96%. It was her. I leaned back in the chair, heart racing. For a second I felt nothing, then everything. It was her. It was Melissa who had written that email. My own sister. Not just dismissing me, not just distancing herself from my past, but actively rewriting it, erasing it, undermining it, betraying it. My thoughts spiraled. Had she always seen me this way, as a threat to her spotlight, as someone whose victories made hers feel smaller? Was it envy or something deeper? I closed my eyes and let the silence expand. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. She hadn't simply accused me of fraud. She had done it quietly, systematically, with precision. She had waited until Dad was gone, until no one would question her word, until I was isolated enough for her lie to seem plausible. And then she had taken her shot. I stared at the screen, at her name, at mine, Fairchild. We had shared that name our whole lives, but she had weaponized it against me. Suddenly memories came back in sharp fragments. Her smug glances during family dinners, when I recounted missions. The way she interrupted me at Dad's memorial when I mentioned his military service. The way she always said we all serve in our own way when I came home in uniform, as if to remind me I wasn't special. I had mistaken those for petty comments, but now I saw the blueprint behind them. She had wanted me invisible. And when silence didn't make me disappear, she chose defamation. I opened my encrypted drive, downloaded a copy of the analysis, and backed it up on 2 separate secure clouds. Then I printed a hard copy. I slipped it into a folder and stared at the cover page, subject internal report Fairchild G. I could have confronted her right then, could have marched into her dressing room and thrown the printout at her feet. But I didn't. Because I wasn't interested in rage. I wanted truth. And truth, when delivered correctly, doesn't scream. It arrives calmly, quietly, and destroys everything in its path. I closed my laptop. There was a wedding today, and Melissa had made sure everyone knew their part in her performance. But she'd forgotten one thing. I hadn't read my lines yet. And when I did, no one would forget them. The reception had ended. The lights dimmed, the guests departed in clusters, and the laughter softened into memory. I stood near the corridor behind the banquet hall, the cold of the night air slipping through the half-open doors. My hands were steady. My mind wasn't. I had waited long enough. Melissa stepped out of the dressing room, still radiant in her wedding gown, still glowing with the praise of strangers. But when she saw me, her smile faltered not in fear, but in inconvenience. "Grace," she said flatly, "we need to talk." She sighed. "Can it wait?" "No." A pause. Then she gestured for me to follow. We walked down a narrow hallway away from the noise, into the quiet. Inside a small utility room behind the floral staging area, she turned. "What do you want?" I held up the folder. "I know you wrote it," I said. "The email. The anonymous tip that cost me my rank. The language match is 96%. It's you." Melissa's eyes didn't widen. She didn't flinch. She simply exhaled as if she'd expected this moment, as if it were overdue. "I had to," she said. "You had to," I repeated. Her voice didn't tremble. "Everyone always loved you, always looked at you like you were some untouchable thing, medals, honors. The quiet soldier who saved lives but never bragged. You made it impossible for the rest of us to be enough." I blinked. "I never asked for that. But you never apologized for it either," she said quickly. "You took up all the space. You always have. Even when you were gone, people still talked about you. Like your absence was bigger than our presence." "That's not a reason to lie," I said quietly. "I didn't lie," she snapped. "I just reminded them of what they didn't see. You had no photos, no records, just a story and a tattoo. I thought, maybe if they questioned it, you'd finally step down. Let someone else matter." My breath caught. "I mattered to Dad." "That's why Dad is gone," she interrupted. "And for once I wanted a spotlight that wasn't filtered through your shadow." The silence after that was heavier than anything she said. I could have screamed, could have shaken her, could have told her how many nights I bled for people she'd never meet, how many bodies I carried, how many mothers I wrote letters for, how I stayed quiet not because I was proud but because I was broken. Instead, I whispered the only thing that really mattered. You knew I'd never defend myself. She didn't deny it, and that's when I understood this hadn't been impulsive. It was deliberate. It was engineered by someone who had studied my silence, counted on my loyalty, and turned both into a weapon. You wanted me erased, I said. I wanted peace, she replied, and somehow that was worse. The door creaked behind us. Mom stood in the frame, arms crossed her evening shawl, draped like a curtain of judgment. Her lipstick hadn't smudged. Not even now. I told you not to make things difficult, she said. I didn't make this difficult, I said. I just showed up. And you always do, she said. That's the problem. Her voice was low measured. Like everything she said had been rehearsed for years. You walk into rooms and people turn. You speak softly and it echoes. But families don't need spotlights, Grace. They need harmony. You are not harmony. I stared at her, stunned. You're saying I broke the family. I'm saying you make things too clear, she said. And people don't like clarity. They like comfort. That's when I knew I had never belonged here. Not really, not in the way they needed. Not in the way they tolerated. They didn't resent my failures. They resented that I didn't fail enough to be forgiven. I looked between them, my mother elegant and cold, my sister shimmering and sharp. This wasn't a family, this was a showroom. And I had been the unsellable product. I'm leaving, I said. No one asked you to come, Melissa whispered. But I saw it, that flicker of fear behind her confidence. She thought I would burn everything down, that I would expose her, that I'd scream, that I'd cry, that I'd beg. I didn't, because I had already won. They didn't know that I'd backed up the analysis, that it was in a secure drive with legal timestamping, that I had already forwarded the email to my mentor in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, that my name, my real name, was already beginning its quiet restoration behind sealed doors. The truth didn't need fireworks, just a steady fuse. I turned to go. My footsteps echoed down the corridor. Behind me, no one called my name, no one asked me to stay, no one said thank you. But I wasn't looking for gratitude, only freedom. And I carried it in my pocket, 8 printed pages, and the silence that followed. I hadn't expected the cameras. It was a wedding, not a press conference. But someone had been filming when Admiral Robert Hutcherson froze mid-step. Someone had caught the moment his eyes locked on the tattoo hidden beneath the sheer of my sleeve. And his voice, once iron, cracked with realization. General Grace. You saved half of us that night. The moment he saluted me, everything shifted. That small movement, simple and solemn, was more than respect. It was recognition. It was history calling my name back from the void. And someone posted it. The clip made its way online by morning. No flashy captions, just a salute no one saw coming. Then it took off. Military forums were first, then veteran networks, then national news. Suddenly people were asking questions. Who was the woman in the background standing still in a pressed navy blue dress with a silver bar over her heart? Why had the Admiral of SEAL Team Echo saluted her? What was the blood path from the Western Ridge? And when the answers came, they didn't whisper. They roared. An independent journalist picked it up next. She cross-referenced the date, the operation, the casualty list, and the gaps in paperwork. She pieced together testimonies from retired SEALs who remembered the ridge, the trap, the impossible escape, and the woman with a cut palm using her own blood to trace escape lines on rock. Within 48 hours, the headline hit the front page, "The Silent Commander." How one woman saved a doomed SEAL operation and disappeared. They didn't need my confirmation. The evidence spoke. One by one, former teammates came forward, men who'd been there that night, who had chosen silence not out of malice, but out of confusion. My name had been scrubbed from mission records. Classified under support unit, unknown, but they remembered. Their voices stitched the story back together, the ambush, the chaos, the smoke, the compass ripped from my belt, the way I slashed my hand without hesitation and wrote arrows across shale and dirt to lead them to safety. And Sean the groom, he said nothing. Not publicly, not privately. He didn't deny, he didn't thank, just silence. But his father did speak. Admiral Hutcherson released a formal statement to the press. It read, "General Grace Fairchild is not only a hero, she is the reason I and most of my men returned that night. Her leadership, composure, and sacrifice should have been acknowledged long ago. That salute was overdue. 3 days later, the Department of Defense reopened my case. The anonymous email that had derailed my promotion was reinvestigated. Digital linguists reviewed my data and confirmed the match with Melissa's writing. The stain on my record was removed. My clearance reinstated. I didn't ask for reinstatement, but I accepted the correction. Because for once, the truth wasn't just mine to hold. Online, I became the Silent Commander, a moniker born from the reality that I had never claimed credit, never sought fame. Strangers messaged me. Veterans saluted me. Young cadets asked for advice. Families of soldiers I'd once saved wrote letters with trembling hands. One said, "We never knew who brought our son back. Now we do. Thank you." The ripple wasn't just national, it was personal. For years I had wondered if silence had been the noble choice, if shrinking into shadows preserves something greater than pride. But silence, I realized, doesn't always protect truth. Sometimes it buries it alive. Now the truth stood on its own, not shouted, not screamed, just standing. And somehow that was louder than any headline. It began with the sponsor withdrawal, a polished email, one paragraph. The media agency that had agreed to cover my sister's wedding pulled out. They cited brand concerns and unforeseen reputational risks. But the meaning was clear: no one wanted to be affiliated with a family that tried to erase a national hero. Melissa's wedding, once staged like a royal event, began to crumble. Next came the messages from extended family. Aunt Joan, who hadn't spoken to me in over a decade, sent a message: "Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I had, I never would have stayed silent." My cousin from Arizona posted publicly, "We grew up hearing Melissa's side of the story. But now the truth is out and I stand with Grace." The dominoes fell fast. RSVPs turned to retractions. The perfect Fairchild-Hutcherson union became a whisper of embarrassment. Photos were taken down, blogs were deleted. Even the wedding planner posted a disclaimer: "We had no knowledge of events prior to the ceremony." Then Sean wrote to me. It came in a thick white envelope, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single page, handwritten: "Grace, I owe you everything and never had the courage to say it. What I did, what I allowed, was cowardice, not malice. I saw you bleeding for us that night. I watched you draw hope on rocks with your own blood. And yet, when I returned, I let the silence grow. I never deserved to marry anyone with your name buried beneath my guilt. I called off the wedding. I've stepped back from the service. And I've asked my father not to defend me. I'm sorry, I know it changes nothing. But maybe it lets you know that at least once I chose honesty." Sean, I folded the letter and placed it in the same folder that held my discharge corrections and the DOD's formal apology. Not as revenge, but as record. Then came my mother's email. No subject line, just, "We should talk." She wrote, "Grace, things are out of control. You've always been direct, but this is hurting people who loved you. Your sister is devastated. The family name is under attack. If you could make a public statement, something neutral just to calm things down, it would mean everything. We don't need details. Just acknowledgement. Protect the family, please. No apology, no ownership. Just another request to disappear." I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the email, slid it into a labeled folder next to the others. Evidence, not for court, for clarity. They wanted me invisible when I wore the uniform. Now they wanted me neutral when the uniform brought attention. But I had learned something in the silence. Truth doesn't owe comfort. It owes presence. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best: it remembered. Memes, videos, tributes flooded in. Hashtags spread. The Silent Commander, Grace Fairchild. Artists drew the blood-mark symbol I had carved that night, turning it into a patch, a badge, a symbol of honor. And people began to ask publicly, why wasn't she recognized sooner? Who tried to silence her? How many more like her have we ignored? That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about anyone who had been buried by the very people who should have protected them. It was about daughters, silenced soldiers, dismissed, truth delayed. My fall had been orchestrated quietly, but their fall echoed. Not loud, but deep and wide. Because it wasn't vengeance, it was vindication. I didn't need them to suffer. I just needed the truth to stand. And it did. stronger than any lie they ever told. I didn't knock. I used the key she never remembered to take back the one hidden under the cracked flower pot by the porch. The house smelled like lemon polish and rose water just as it always had. The kind of cleanliness that wasn't warm. The kind that erased fingerprints. She was seated in the sunroom dressed like a woman expecting someone important. Pearl earrings, lipstick that matched the tea set. She looked up and smiled in a way that belonged in a campaign ad. Not in a conversation between mother and daughter. "Grace," she said, as if I were early for brunch. "How thoughtful of you to visit." I didn't sit. I placed 2 items on the coffee table between us. The first, a printed copy of the email she'd sent, asking me to stay neutral to protect the family's name. The second, a signed order bearing the Department of Defense seal my newly assigned mission directive titled, in bold, "Right to be seen." Her eyes moved slowly from one page to the other. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her porcelain teacup, but she didn't lift it. "I thought," she said softly, "we might speak without theatrics." "This isn't a performance," I replied. "This is clarity." I sat then. Not because she'd asked, but because my message had weight. And I wanted her to feel it land. "I'm not here to argue," I began. "I'm not even here to demand anything. I came for a single reason." She tilted her head like someone rehearsing empathy. I continued. "I came to ask you to never retell my story, as if you were the one who suffered through it." Her mouth parted slightly, but I raised a hand. "No rewrites," I said. "Not at the next garden club. Not in hushed tones at church. Not in any version where you are the misunderstood mother of a difficult daughter. I never said you were difficult. You never had to." There was a long pause. Then she placed her teacup down carefully and folded her hands in her lap. "You know," she said, "I always believed you'd come back. Even after everything. Because deep down you've always wanted belonging." I smiled, not because she was right, but because she was wrong in a way that finally made sense. "I didn't come back for belonging," I said. "I came back to reclaim truth." She flinched barely, but I saw it. "Do you want me to apologize?" she asked, voice thin as lace. "Will that give you peace?" "Peace," I echoed. "Peace isn't something you give. It's something I claimed the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist." She swallowed. Her voice dropped lower. "Do you forgive me?" I looked her in the eye. Not out of defiance, but because I owed myself the dignity of full presence. "No," I said. "But I don't need to." She blinked. "I don't need forgiveness to move forward," I explained. "I don't need closure in the form of your words. What I need, what I've always needed, is for you to stay silent when silence is the only decent thing left to do." She was silent then. For once, not because she was pretending. Not because she was weighing optics, but because she understood there was nothing left to curate. I stood gathering the documents. "You raised a daughter who saves people," I said. "Just not the way you thought." I walked toward the door, then paused. "You once told me not to wear my rank to a funeral," I added. "But this mission, this truth, it's not about rank." I held up the order. "It's about visibility. And I won't vanish for your comfort ever again." And I left her there, in a house that smelled like perfection, but echoed with denial, in a silence that for once was finally earned. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The latch clicked softly behind me, a quiet punctuation mark, to a sentence I had been rewriting my entire life. The air outside was different, not colder or warmer, just real. The kind of air you notice when your body is no longer bracing for impact. I walked down the steps of my mother's porch, like someone who didn't need to prove anything anymore, not even to herself. There was no one waiting in the car, no music playing, no witness to the moment. And that was the most powerful part of it all. Because for the first time, I didn't need anyone to see me leave. I wasn't storming out. I wasn't retreating. I wasn't dramatic or defeated or vindicated. I was done. Not with anger, not with grief. Just done with carrying it all like a second skin I never asked for. As I reached the sidewalk, I paused not to look back, but to inhale. Deeply. Not like a soldier taking in terrain. Like a woman returning to her own body. My boots made soft thuds on the pavement, but they didn't feel heavy. Funny how I used to walk around with medals weighing on my chest, and silence weighing on my name. Now I had neither, and yet I felt taller. Every step was a quiet ceremony. Not of revenge, not of triumph, of release. It wasn't about winning. I knew that now. It was never about convincing them to love me the right way or speak my name with pride. It was about not shrinking to fit their comfort anymore. The street was lined with old trees, ones I'd walked past hundreds of times, growing up always wondering if they remembered more than my family did. This time, I didn't wonder. I simply let them stand. Like me. At the corner, a little girl was learning to ride her bike, her father jogging beside her with open arms and a loud cheer. "Keep going, you've got it," I smiled. Not because I envied it, but because I had become it. Not the little girl, the voice inside that finally believed I've got it. I kept walking. There was no destination. I didn't need one. I wasn't walking toward something. I was walking without something. Without the echo of my mother's disappointment. Without the sting of my sister's envy. Without the ache of being edited out of my own life. I passed the bakery where we used to get Sunday rolls. The library where I once checked out every book on Navy history. The bench where my father once told me you don't have to be loud to lead. And maybe that was the part they hated most. That I didn't shout. That I didn't plead. That I saved lives without asking to be crowned. But this silence, the one I carried now, wasn't like theirs. Theirs was erasure. Mine was clarity. Mine said, "You cannot rewrite me anymore." As I reached the edge of the block, I paused for one last look. Not at the house, not at the past, at myself. There was a shop window, its glass slightly warped. My reflection wasn't perfect, but it was honest. A woman in plain clothes, no badges, no scars showing. Just eyes that had seen too much and blinked less often because of it. Just a spine that no longer curled to make room for people who never offered space. Just a name, Grace Fairchild, that no longer waited for someone else to say it. I touched the tattoo on my hand, not to remind myself of what I'd done, but to remind myself I didn't need to prove it anymore. I smiled, not for the window, for me. And I walked on, leaving nothing behind but weight that never should have been mine to carry. It started with one letter, not to my mother, not to Melissa, but to a woman in Georgia, a veteran, discharged with honors but erased from every photo in her family's house. I found her through a military support forum. She had written anonymously, asking if anyone else had been told to tone it down at their own welcome home dinner. I replied with my real name. She wrote back in disbelief. "You're the silent commander." I told her yes, but I was done being silent. That's when the idea was born. I called it the Blood Mark Protocol, named after the mark I made with my own blood to guide others out of the ridge. It was never meant to be a symbol of pain. It was always about direction. And now it would guide others too, those who survived combat, but came home to a different kind of battlefield. Shame, silence. Families who celebrated the idea of sacrifice, but shrank from the messiness of its aftermath. The Blood Mark Protocol would be a space, a network, a fund, and most importantly, a voice for those who weren't just fighting PTSD, but betrayal from those who should have held them. I didn't expect the momentum. Within weeks, we had hundreds of stories. A Marine whose sister claimed his Silver Star was a fabrication. A Navy linguist whose father told guests she only did translation stuff and not real missions. An Army medic whose wedding invitation labeled her as former military aide, while listing her brother, a civilian recruiter, as hero. Their stories weren't about needing glory. They were about being invisible in the very rooms they had fought to protect. I knew exactly what that felt like, and I wasn't going to let it continue. I filed for nonprofit status. I built a small board, no titles, no ranks, just people who had lived it. We launched a campaign called Home Isn't Always Safe, and then came the call from the Pentagon. They wanted me to speak, not in a small forum, not behind closed doors, at the Defense Policy hearing on veteran reintegration and family trauma. They gave me 5 minutes. I took 7. I walked in without a uniform. I didn't want them to listen because of my medals. I wanted them to hear me because I told the truth. I stood before generals, senators, analysts, and I said, we have policies for battlefield injuries, for re-entry, for mental health. But what protocol exists for betrayal by blood? What about the soldiers who come home and have to pretend they weren't there because their families find their strength inconvenient? We honor silence too much. We need a framework for recognizing when silence becomes violence. We need a resilience protocol for the invisible aftermath. The room was silent, not out of offense, out of recognition. Afterward, a retired admiral came up to me. "They'll resist it," he warned. "Families are too sacred a topic." I nodded. So was combat. Until women died in it, he didn't argue. Weeks later, I got the call they were assigning a task force to study family origin trauma in veteran reintegration cases. It wasn't a miracle. It was a start. The Bloodmark Protocol expanded. We opened our first center in Colorado Springs. We staffed it with counselors, legal advisors, and translators for those whose families weaponized culture and silence. We offered protection not from the enemy, but from erasure. One of our slogans read, "You should not have to disappear to survive your homecoming." Every day I saw women and men walk into our doors unsure if they were allowed to be angry. By the time they left, they weren't angry. They were whole. And so was I. I hadn't rebuilt a family, but I'd built something stronger, a foundation that didn't flinch at the truth. And this time, no one could rewrite it. Not even blood. After I stepped down from the podium, I didn't expect applause. And I was right, there wasn't any. No standing ovation, no handshakes queued in a row, no reporters shouting questions, just silence. But not the kind that used to haunt me. This one had weight and respect. I turned and walked back toward my seat at the rear of the chamber. I was almost there when I noticed him. A young officer, probably mid-20s in full-dress uniform. He rose quietly from his chair and stepped into the aisle. He stood at attention. And then he saluted me. Not a lazy gesture, not a hurried motion to check a box. It was deliberate, steady, measured. He held it. For a second I wondered if I should respond. The ceremony was over. The hearing was adjourned. I wasn't in command anymore, but I nodded. I gave a single slow nod. It wasn't protocol. It was personal. He lowered his hand. No words, no smile. Just a breath of air held in his chest like he was anchoring something heavy. And then he returned to his seat. No one else moved. No one needed to. That one salute said everything. I sat down and kept my hands in my lap. My breathing was calm. My heart didn't race. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. There were no cameras flashing, no dramatic orchestras playing in the background. Just a room full of people who had heard the truth and hadn't turned away from it. Later in the hallway, someone passed me a folded note. There was no name on it. Inside it said, "You put words to what I've lived for 10 years. I thought I was alone. I'm not. Thank you." I kept it. Not because I needed validation, but because it was real. Not curated. Not packaged for media. Not reduced to a soundbite. Just someone recognizing another someone. Back home, I placed the note in a drawer next to my deployment tags. It belonged there. Not because it was a war story, but because it was part of what survival looked like afterward. Recognition doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it's a young officer who sees you not as a headline, not as a controversy, but as a person who kept going even when it was easier not to. Sometimes it's the silence that doesn't dismiss you. And in that moment, for the first time in my adult life, I felt something I had never truly allowed myself to believe I deserved: belonging. Not in a family photo. Not in a forced seat at a wedding. Not in someone else's story that conveniently edited me out. I belonged because I existed unapologetically and visibly. After the hearing, I got requests for interviews, features, collaborations. I declined most of them. I didn't want to turn my pain into a product. This wasn't for clickbait. This wasn't a redemption arc scripted by someone else. This was my life finally lived without a footnote attached. A week later, a senator's office reached out requesting my presence at a private roundtable. I sent a junior rep from the Bloodmark Protocol instead. "I trust her," I said. "She doesn't need to tell my story. She has her own," and she did. That was the point. Not to be the voice for the voiceless, but to prove we were never voiceless to begin with. We had just been ignored. Now they were listening. There were no headlines that day, no viral clips. Just a quiet shift in how the room looked at me. Not as a mistake to be fixed, not as a burden to be softened, but as a presence that didn't need permission to stand where I stood. The room didn't stand for me. The room stood with me. And that made all the difference. It's been a year. The air in Vermont is cleaner, or maybe I just breathe differently now. The cottage I live in sits near a tree line far enough from the nearest town that I can hear myself think. but close enough for supplies and the occasional visit from a neighbor with a pie and a story. No one calls me commander anymore, but when I walk through the market or hold the door open for someone, they nod politely and say, "Ma'am." Not because they know what I've done, but because of how I carry myself now. I don't correct them. There's a rhythm to my days. I rise early. I tend the little herb garden, out back make coffee, and read the local paper, even though it's mostly about farmer co-ops and bake sales. It's enough. Once a week, I teach a survival course for younger veterans. We don't talk about medals or missions. We focus on the present, how to build a fire without kindling, how to read the sky before the rain comes. Some of them still walk like they're carrying 1,000 pounds on their backs. I don't tell them to let it go. I just show them how to carry it differently. Sometimes that's all someone needs. The young ones call me Miss Fairchild or just G. A few have asked what I used to do. I tell them I worked in logistics. It's not a lie, just not the whole truth. They see the tattoo on my hand, the small mark just below my thumb. It's faded and most think it's some sort of symbol from a past deployment. A few ask directly, "Ma'am, what's that ink mean?" I usually smile. Sometimes I shrug, and once when a boy named Eli pushed a little harder, I said, "It means I survived being erased." He didn't ask again. At night I sit on the porch with a blanket and a journal. I don't write about the past. I don't need to anymore. The silence isn't lonely now. It's mine. The wind rustles through the trees in a way that reminds me of chopper blades, but not enough to unsettle me. I've made peace with echoes. A while back, someone from a national magazine reached out. They wanted to do a profile, the woman behind the medal. I declined. The story they wanted had already been written, and I didn't write it. This life here now, this is the version I authored. My neighbors know me as the woman with strong shoulders and quiet eyes. The kids think I used to be a park ranger. I don't correct them either. Let the legends be soft ones. I get letters sometimes, mostly from people I've never met. Veterans, wives, daughters, sons, strangers who read the transcript from the hearing and felt something crack open in them. I read each one. I don't always respond, but I keep them stacked in a drawer beside the matches and compass I use for class. Not as trophies, as reminders that telling the truth once is enough. You don't have to scream it from the mountaintop every day for it to stay real. One morning, a local shopkeeper handed me a folded note with my change. Inside, in crooked handwriting, it said, "Thank you for not letting them write you out." I walked home in silence, held the paper between my fingers, and didn't cry. There's a freedom in not needing to explain anymore, in not having to defend what you lived through to those who never wanted to understand. In the spring, I plan to expand the program. Not into a nonprofit. Nothing with a board or donors. Just more space in the woods, more tools, more hands, learning how to survive and maybe how to begin again. Sometimes I still get the urge to check old news clips, but I don't. Not because I'm afraid, but because that version of me belongs to a time that no longer defines me. I don't need to prove it, not to them, not even to myself. I just wake up, plant things, teach skills, and let the quiet remind me I am still here, and I am not invisible. There's a drawer in my cottage. Old oak single handle, doesn't quite close all the way. Inside, I keep matches, a compass, folded notes from strangers, and one envelope I never opened. It came from my sister. The handwriting on the front is unmistakable. A little rushed, a little careful, like she wasn't sure whether to finish writing my name. But she did. Grace, nothing more. No return address. No postmark I could trace. Just that one word. I kept it. At first, out of curiosity, then out of habit. Then because I wanted to prove to myself that I could hold on to something without letting it have power over me. Months passed. Seasons changed. The envelope stayed there untouched. Sometimes late at night, I'd sit on the porch and wonder what it said. Maybe an apology. Maybe another attempt to twist the narrative. Maybe silence in the shape of words. But the truth is, I didn't need to know. If there was regret in that letter, it wasn't mine to carry. If there was denial, I'd already lived through enough of it. And if there was love, it was too late to be built on ashes. Yesterday, the rain started before dawn. Steady cold, not the dramatic kind that demands attention, but the kind that sinks into soil and stays a while. I lit a fire in the old stone hearth, not out of necessity, but because it felt like the right kind of day to let go. I opened the drawer, took out the letter, stared at it for a moment, and then walked to the fireplace. I didn't hesitate. The envelope caught quickly. Flames curled the corners inward like it was folding into itself. The ink turned black, then disappeared. No words escaped. None needed to. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but ash. Not once did I feel sadness. Not once did I wonder if I'd made a mistake. I didn't need her to say I was worthy. I just needed to know deep in the marrow of my own bones that I was no longer the girl they could pretend didn't exist. I stood there a long time, not moving. Then I whispered to the empty room, not with bitterness, but with clarity, I'm not what they tried to erase. Outside, the rain continued, but the world felt still. Not silent in a haunted way, silent in a clean way. Like something heavy had finally been set down. I poured myself tea, curled up in the old armchair near the window, let the steam warm my face, and felt truly for the first time in decades, light. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock loudly. It waits quietly, softly, until you're finally ready to open your own heart and say, I don't need to be proven. I don't need to be forgiven. I just need to be free. Take care. I'll see you in the next story. Grace.